Open your closet right now, in your mind. Count how many things in there you've worn exactly once. Now count how many of them you actually chose versus how many you simply bought because the price made the decision for you. In many Japanese households, that second number is close to zero. Not because they have more money, because they were never taught to buy the cheap version 5 times. They were taught to buy the right version once. Today, I'm breaking down the actual rule behind that, the one Japanese households have quietly used for generations to spend less while owning more of what actually matters. Stay with me, because by the middle of this video, you'll understand exactly why the deal you bought last month already cost you more than the expensive option you walked past. And by the end, I'll give you one simple test you can run on your very next purchase, starting today. The first thing to understand is that choosing quality over quantity doesn't begin when you reach the checkout counter. It begins much earlier, with the way you think about what you're buying in the first place, because most of us have been trained to look at the price before we look at the object. We see a shirt for $10 and another for $50, and almost automatically, the cheaper one feels like the smarter decision. We tell ourselves we're being practical, we're saving money, we're getting more for less. It only measures the moment you buy the item. It doesn't measure what happens afterward. Maybe that $10 shirt looks perfectly fine when you first bring it home. You wear it a few times, then the fabric starts losing its shape, the color isn't quite the same anymore. The stitching begins to loosen. Eventually you stop reaching for it. So you buy another one, and then another. Nothing felt expensive at the time. Every individual purchase seemed small enough to justify. But look at the total after 2 years. You didn't buy one shirt. You bought 5 versions of the same decision. This is where the Japanese approach becomes much more interesting than simply saying, buy expensive things. That's not the lesson. The lesson is to stop judging a purchase only by its initial price. Instead, think about the entire life of the object. How often will you use it? How long will it last? How well does it perform? Will you still want it after the excitement of buying it disappears? And perhaps most importantly, would you rather own one thing that genuinely works for you, or several things that are merely acceptable? That question becomes surprisingly powerful when you apply it to everyday life. Think about your shoes. If you walk a lot, your shoes aren't just something you wear occasionally. They become part of your day. You depend on them when you're walking to work, shopping, traveling, standing in the kitchen, or simply moving around your home. Now imagine buying the cheapest pair you can find. At first you feel like you've made a smart choice. You spent less, but after a few months, the sole becomes uncomfortable. Your feet don't feel as supported. Maybe the material starts breaking down, so you replace them. Then perhaps you find another cheap pair because the first one didn't work. Eventually, the money you've spent isn't particularly small anymore. And there's another cost that doesn't appear on the receipt: the inconvenience, the time spent searching again, the frustration of having something that doesn't quite work, the space occupied by the old pair, the decision about whether to keep it, throw it away, donate it, or somehow justify keeping it just in case. This is why the idea of quality reaches far beyond durability. A good object can reduce friction in your everyday life. It can simply work. You don't have to think about it constantly. You don't have to replace it every few months. You don't have to keep searching for something better because the thing you already own is doing exactly what you needed it to do. And that's a very different kind of value. There's also something psychological that happens when you buy carefully. You become more connected to what you own. When every purchase is cheap and easy, it's easy to accumulate without thinking. A new shirt here, a kitchen gadget there, a storage box because it was on sale, another pair of shoes because the price looked too good to ignore. None of these decisions feels serious on its own. But eventually, your home becomes a record of hundreds of tiny decisions you made without really thinking about them. Open a drawer and you'll see it. Look inside your closet and you'll see it. Walk into the kitchen and you'll see it. Objects that aren't necessarily bad, but aren't particularly meaningful either. They simply arrived because buying them was easy. And once you recognize that pattern, the solution isn't necessarily to throw everything away. It's to become more careful about what comes in next. Because the easiest clutter to manage is the clutter you never bring home. This is one reason a quality-first mindset can actually make a home feel calmer without requiring you to become extremely minimalist. You don't need an empty room. You need fewer objects that make you question why you still own them. Imagine opening your closet and seeing only clothes that fit properly, feel comfortable, and make you feel good when you wear them. Imagine reaching into your kitchen drawer and finding the tool you need immediately instead of moving 6 other things out of the way first. Imagine having one reliable bag that you use constantly instead of 3 bags you keep switching between because none of them quite works. That isn't deprivation, that's clarity. And there's a subtle difference between owning less and owning better. Owning less simply reduces the number. Owning better changes your relationship with the things that remain. You start noticing craftsmanship. You notice how something feels in your hands. You notice whether a chair is actually comfortable. You notice whether a jacket still looks good after repeated use. You notice whether a kitchen tool makes a task easier or simply takes up another drawer. And once you start noticing those things, price becomes only one part of the decision. Sometimes the more expensive option genuinely isn't worth it. Sometimes a simple, inexpensive item does exactly what you need and lasts perfectly well. That's completely fine. Quality isn't measured by the number printed on the price tag. It's measured by the value you receive from the thing over the time you use it. That's an important distinction. Because otherwise, you can make the opposite mistake and turn quality over quantity into an excuse to spend more. You don't need the premium version of everything. You don't need designer clothes. You don't need the most expensive kitchen equipment. You don't need to convince yourself that a higher price makes an object more meaningful. The real question is much quieter. Does this particular thing deserve my money, my space, and my attention? If it does, buy it. If it doesn't, the fact that it's discounted doesn't suddenly change the answer. And once you begin asking that question consistently, something interesting starts to happen. You stop seeing shopping as a hunt for the lowest possible price. You start seeing it as a process of selecting what deserves to stay in your life. That shift may seem small, but repeated over years, it changes everything. Because the goal was never to own expensive things. The goal was to stop repeatedly buying things you didn't really want in the first place. There's another part of this mindset that becomes clear once you stop looking only at durability. Quality isn't simply about how long something survives, it's about how often that thing becomes part of your life. Think about the objects you touch every single day: your shoes, your chair, your mattress, your bag, your coffee cup, your kitchen knife, your phone, your coat. Some of these things may seem completely ordinary. They're not luxury purchases, they're just objects you use without thinking much about them. But that's exactly why they deserve more attention. An object you use once a year doesn't have the same importance as something you interact with every morning. If you buy a decorative item for a shelf and it lasts 10 years, that's fine, but you may only notice it occasionally. Now compare that with a chair you sit in for several hours every day, or a pair of shoes you walk in constantly, or a bag you carry everywhere. The difference isn't only how long the object lasts, it's how many experiences you have with it. Imagine choosing between 2 chairs. One is slightly cheaper, but the seat is uncomfortable. The back doesn't support you properly, and after an hour you start shifting around to find a better position. The other costs more, but every time you sit down, your body immediately feels comfortable. You don't think about the chair, and that's actually the point. A well-chosen object often becomes invisible in your daily life because it simply does its job. You don't have to fight with it. You don't have to adjust it constantly. You don't have to wonder whether you should replace it. It quietly supports the routine you're already living. That's a very different kind of value from the excitement you feel when you first open a package. And this is where many people misunderstand the idea of buying quality. They think quality means buying the most expensive version available, but that's not what we're talking about. A higher price doesn't automatically create higher value. You can spend a huge amount of money on something you barely use. You can also spend a modest amount on something you use every single day and receive enormous value from it. The important question is not, is this expensive? The better question is, how much of my life will this object actually touch? If the answer is almost every day, then it's worth slowing down before making the decision. Take something as simple as a bag. You might carry it hundreds of times in a year. You put your keys inside, your wallet, your phone, maybe a notebook, maybe your laptop. You carry it through rain, you place it on the floor, you lift it into a car, you take it onto public transport. You use the straps again and again. Now imagine buying a bag simply because it was cheap. At first, the price feels satisfying, but then the zipper starts catching. The strap becomes uncomfortable. The material doesn't hold its shape. The pockets aren't where you need them, and eventually, you're annoyed every time you use it. That's something a receipt will never show you. The cost of irritation, the cost of inconvenience, the cost of constantly thinking, I should probably replace this. A better made bag may cost more at the beginning, but if you use it every day for years, the value can be completely different. And sometimes, you don't even need to calculate the numbers, you can feel the difference. The same thing happens with clothing. A cheap shirt can look perfectly good on the hanger. But what happens after 10 washes? Does the fabric still feel good? Does it still fit properly? Does the color still look the same? Do you actually want to wear it? Or does it slowly become the shirt you keep because throwing it away feels wasteful, even though you never choose it? This is where buying fewer, better things begins to affect your closet. Instead of asking, how many shirts can I get for this amount? You start asking, which shirt will I actually enjoy wearing? That question naturally reduces unnecessary purchases, because suddenly, 5 slightly different versions don't feel like 5 opportunities. They feel like 5 decisions. And every decision has a cost. Not necessarily a financial cost, a mental one. You have to choose between them. You have to organize them. You have to wash them. You have to store them. You have to remember that you own them. This is one reason a crowded home can feel tiring even when everything technically has a place. The problem isn't always physical clutter. Sometimes it's decision clutter. Too many options, too many similar objects, too many things that are almost right. And when you begin choosing quality more intentionally, you're also reducing that noise. You don't need 12 versions of something when 2 excellent versions cover the real need. You don't need a drawer full of kitchen tools when a few reliable tools handle the work. You don't need a closet packed with clothes when the clothes you actually love wearing are already enough. This doesn't mean your home has to look empty. A Japanese-inspired approach to simplicity isn't about making every room look like nobody lives there. It's about making sure the things that remain have a reason to remain. And there's another interesting consequence. When you spend more carefully, you often start taking better care of what you already own. You notice small damage earlier. You clean things instead of immediately replacing them. You repair something when repair makes sense. You store things properly. You stop treating objects as disposable simply because replacing them is easy. That changes the relationship between you and your possessions. Instead of, it's cheap, if it breaks, I'll get another. The mindset becomes, I chose this carefully, so I'll take care of it. That difference can have a surprisingly large effect over time. Think about a wooden table. If you expect it to be temporary, a scratch feels like a reason to replace it. But if you've chosen it because you genuinely like it and expect to keep it for years, the same scratch becomes part of its history. You maintain it. You care for it. You allow it to become familiar. And suddenly, the object isn't valuable because it's perfect. It's valuable because it has earned a place in your life. This is also where Japanese ideas around simplicity and appreciation can offer an interesting perspective. There is beauty in using something repeatedly instead of constantly chasing the newest version. A favorite cup doesn't need to be replaced because a newer cup appeared in a store. A reliable jacket doesn't suddenly become useless because another style became fashionable. A good knife doesn't need to be replaced every year simply because a new model exists. When something works, there can be value in letting it remain part of your life. And that brings us back to the original question, what are you actually paying for when you buy something? You're not only paying for the object, you're paying for the experiences that object will create. Comfort, convenience, reliability, time saved, space preserved, and sometimes, peace of mind. That's why the better question isn't whether something costs $10 or $100. The better question is whether the difference in price creates a meaningful difference in your everyday life. If it does, the more expensive option may genuinely be the better decision. If it doesn't, keep your money. That's the part people often miss. Choosing quality over quantity doesn't mean automatically choosing the expensive option. It means becoming difficult to impress with a low price alone. A discount doesn't make an object valuable. A brand doesn't make it valuable. A beautiful package doesn't make it valuable. What makes it valuable is whether it continues to earn its place in your life long after the excitement of buying it has disappeared. And once you start looking at purchases that way, the entire shopping experience begins to change. You stop asking what you can get. You start asking what is actually worth having. And that is where the real difference between buying more and buying better begins. There's a trap that makes cheap things almost impossible to resist. It's the feeling that you're getting away with something. You walk into a store and see a shirt marked down by 50%. You see a kitchen appliance with a huge discount. You find a pair of shoes that originally cost much more, now sitting at a price that feels almost impossible to ignore. And before you even ask whether you need it, your mind starts celebrating the money you're supposedly saving. That's how the word deal can completely change the way we think. Instead of asking, "Do I actually want this?" we start asking, "How could I possibly leave this behind at this price?" Those questions sound similar, but they're not. The first one protects your money. The second one can convince you to spend it. And this is one of the biggest reasons quantity keeps winning over quality. Because cheap purchases rarely feel like serious decisions. $10 doesn't feel like a decision. $20 doesn't feel like a decision. Another small purchase doesn't feel like a decision. But put 20 of those small decisions together, and suddenly you've spent hundreds of dollars on things that never became important enough to deserve the space they occupy. This is where you need to be careful with discounts. A discount can be useful when it reduces the price of something you already intended to buy, but when the discount creates the desire to buy something you never needed, the discount isn't saving you money, it's creating a reason to spend. Imagine you walk into a clothing store looking for one good jacket. You already know what you need. You want something comfortable, durable, simple enough to wear regularly, and suitable for the weather. Then you see a rack filled with shirts. They're heavily discounted. You weren't looking for them, but the price is so low that suddenly you start thinking about buying one. Then you see another color, then another style. Then you tell yourself, "It's cheap, I might as well." You leave the store feeling like you got a bargain. But when you get home, something interesting happens. The jacket you originally came for gets hung in your closet. The discounted shirts get pushed onto another hanger. A few weeks later, you're still wearing the same clothes you already owned. The new shirts aren't bad. They simply weren't necessary. And that's the difference between buying because something is useful and buying because something is available cheaply. Once you understand that difference, the phrase limited time offer becomes much less powerful. Because you realize that urgency doesn't automatically create value. Sometimes the smartest response to a great deal is simply walking away, not because the product is bad, not because you're trying to spend nothing, but because you already know that your money has a better purpose somewhere else. There's another trap here too. It's called buying backups. You find something you like, so you buy two. Then you see another variation and think you should have three. It feels responsible. After all, you'll eventually use them, maybe. But the problem is that eventually can become a very expensive word. You buy an extra jacket because you might need it, an extra kitchen tool because the current one might break, extra containers because someday you'll have something to store, extra clothes because perhaps you'll need them for a different occasion. And slowly, your home becomes a storage system for hypothetical future versions of your life. This is where the quality mindset asks a much harder question. Would I buy this if I couldn't store it? Imagine every purchase had to stay visible. Imagine you had no extra drawer, no empty closet, no storage room, no cabinet where you could hide things you aren't using. Would you still buy it? That question can reveal a lot, because sometimes we don't buy an object because we need the object. We buy it because we have somewhere to put it. And when storage is available, the consequences of unnecessary buying become invisible. You don't feel the cost immediately. You simply put the thing away. Then months later, you discover it again, and the cycle starts over. This is why choosing quality over quantity has a relationship with Japanese ideas of simplicity. The goal isn't necessarily to own as little as possible. The goal is to become intentional about what deserves your attention. If something genuinely improves your daily life, it can be worth owning. If something is beautiful and meaningful to you, it can be worth keeping. If something is used constantly and performs well, it can absolutely deserve its place. But if the only reason you're buying it is because the price looks unusually low, that's a warning sign. And here's a simple test you can use the next time you're standing in front of a discount shelf. Ask yourself, would I still want this if there were no discount? Don't overthink it. Just answer honestly. If the answer is yes, then continue evaluating the item. Is the quality good? Will you use it? Does it solve a real problem? Will you still want it next year? But if the answer is no, you've probably just discovered what the discount was really selling you, not the product, the feeling of getting a deal. And that feeling can disappear much faster than the object itself. There's another reason this matters. Cheap purchases can create a strange form of guilt. You buy something because it was inexpensive, so throwing it away later feels wasteful. You don't use it, but you keep it. You don't like it, but you keep it. You don't need it, but you keep it. Because somewhere in the back of your mind you're thinking, but I paid for it. So now the object isn't only taking up physical space, it's carrying a small emotional weight. Every time you open the drawer, you see it. Every time you organize the closet, you move it. Every time you consider decluttering, you hesitate. And all of that started with a purchase that seemed harmless. This is why the cheapest item can sometimes become the most expensive item in the room, not because of its price, because of everything that happens after the purchase. The time, the space, the replacement, the frustration, the guilt, the attention. Quality first thinking tries to prevent that chain before it begins. Instead of asking, what can I get for this amount? You ask, what deserves this amount? That's a much stronger question. Because now your money has a purpose. You're not trying to maximize the number of things you can bring home. You're trying to maximize the usefulness of what you choose to bring home. And that changes how you see almost every shopping situation. You walk past the $5 item and don't automatically feel like you're missing an opportunity. You see the expensive option and don't automatically assume it's better. You slow down, you compare, you think about how often you'll use it, you consider how long you expect to keep it. You imagine where it will live, and then you decide. Sometimes you'll choose the inexpensive item, sometimes you'll choose the more expensive one, and sometimes you'll choose nothing. That last option is important, because a quality-first lifestyle isn't about becoming better at buying. It's also about becoming better at not buying. And once you're comfortable walking away from things you don't really need, something surprising happens. You begin to notice how often you were previously being pushed toward a purchase simply because someone made it feel urgent. A countdown, a discount, a limited quantity, a special offer, a buy one, get one message. None of those things answer the question that actually matters. Does this deserve a place in my life? And that is the question you want to carry with you, not only into stores, but into your online shopping cart, into your wardrobe, into your kitchen, into every little decision where cheap is trying to sound like smart. Because sometimes the smartest purchase is the one that lasts, and sometimes it's the one you never make. But there's an even deeper reason this quality over quantity mindset can change the way your home feels. It isn't only about how much money you spend, it's about how many things you allow into your life in the first place. Every object you bring home eventually needs somewhere to exist. It needs a drawer, a shelf, a closet, a cabinet, a corner, a place on the kitchen counter. And even when you don't consciously think about it, every object creates a tiny responsibility. You have to clean around it. You have to move it when you're looking for something else. You have to remember that you own it. And eventually, you may have to decide what to do with it. One object doesn't seem like much, but multiply that by hundreds. That's when the relationship between spending and clutter becomes obvious. The things you buy today can become the things you have to manage tomorrow. This is why a quality-first approach isn't simply a financial strategy. It can also become a way of protecting your space. Think about a kitchen drawer. Imagine opening it and finding only the things you actually use: a good knife, a reliable peeler, a few utensils, maybe one or two tools that make your cooking easier. Everything has enough room. Nothing is buried underneath something else. Now compare that with a drawer, where every cheap gadget you've ever found interesting has been pushed inside. a vegetable slicer you used once, a small tool you bought because it was on sale, a duplicate opener, a strange kitchen gadget you thought might be useful someday. None of these objects necessarily looks like a problem individually, but together they make the drawer difficult to use. You open it and immediately have to move things around. You search, you push, you rearrange, and eventually you close it again. The object you actually needed was there the whole time. It was simply surrounded by things that didn't deserve the same space. This is what happens when quantity grows without intention, and the same thing can happen inside a closet. You don't necessarily have too many clothes, because every single piece is terrible. You may simply have too many clothes that are almost right. A shirt that fits, but not perfectly. A jacket that looks good, but isn't comfortable. A pair of trousers that you keep because you might wear them someday. A sweater that was expensive, so you don't want to get rid of it. And then there are the things you actually love. The shirt you automatically reach for. The trousers that fit perfectly. The jacket that works with almost everything. The shoes you can wear for hours without thinking about your feet. Those are the items that quietly reveal what quality means to you. Because when you consistently choose something, your behavior is giving you information. You may own 10 shirts, but if you repeatedly wear the same 2 or 3, those clothes are telling you something. They're telling you what you actually value: comfort, fit, simplicity, durability, color, ease. Maybe it's something else entirely, but your habits know. And instead of ignoring that information and continuing to buy more, you can use it. The next time you need to replace something, pay attention to what you already reach for. What makes you choose that particular item? Why does it feel better? Why does it work better? Why do you keep returning to it? Those answers can become your personal definition of quality, and that is much more useful than a marketing label, because quality is personal. A beautifully designed object that doesn't suit your lifestyle isn't necessarily a quality purchase for you. The best version is the one that fits the way you actually live. That's an important distinction. You don't need someone else to tell you what is worth paying for. You need to understand what you use repeatedly and what genuinely improves your day. Maybe it's a good pair of walking shoes. Maybe it's a mattress. Maybe it's a cooking pan. Maybe it's a winter coat. Maybe it's something as simple as a water bottle you carry every day. The object doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be useful. And when you identify those things, you can spend more carefully where it matters and stop spending everywhere else. This is where the idea of one good item becomes powerful. One good item doesn't mean one expensive item. It means one item that genuinely fulfills the purpose. If one reliable pan handles almost everything you cook, you don't necessarily need 5 specialized pans. If one comfortable jacket works for most of your daily life, you don't necessarily need 6 jackets competing for space. If one dependable bag carries everything you need, you don't necessarily need a collection of bags simply because different ones happen to be discounted. The goal isn't to make your possessions disappear. The goal is to make them useful again. And there's something emotionally satisfying about that. When you own something for a long time, it becomes familiar. You know how it feels. You know how it works. You know exactly where it belongs. You don't have to think about replacing it. You don't have to compare 10 alternatives. You don't have to wonder whether another version might be better. You simply use it. That familiarity can create a quiet kind of comfort that constant consumption doesn't provide, because buying something new creates excitement, but using something you trust creates stability. And stability is often much more valuable in everyday life than another moment of excitement. This is also where repair becomes important. When something inexpensive breaks, replacing it can sometimes feel easier than fixing it. But when you've deliberately chosen something because you value it, you become more willing to maintain it. You clean it, you repair it, you take care of it, you protect it from unnecessary damage, and that behavior extends its useful life. Instead of treating everything as temporary, you begin to see certain possessions as things worth looking after. There's something deeply practical about that. The longer an item remains useful, the fewer times you need to search for its replacement. The fewer replacements you buy, the less packaging enters your home. The fewer things you bring home, the less storage you need. And the less storage you need, the easier your space becomes to maintain. One decision starts influencing another. That's why this isn't really about a single shopping rule. It's a system. Buy carefully, use fully, maintain what works, replace only when necessary, and when replacement becomes necessary, choose something that genuinely solves the problem. You don't have to follow every minimalist rule you've ever heard. You don't have to count every possession. You don't have to make your home look empty. You simply have to become more selective about what deserves to enter. Because once something enters your home, it becomes much harder to ignore. At first, you might think you're buying an object, but you're also buying a future decision. Where will it go? How often will I use it? Will I maintain it? Will I replace it? Will I eventually throw it away? Will I regret buying it? Those questions may sound excessive for a small purchase, but that's exactly why they matter. You don't need to ask them with every bottle of water or every ordinary necessity. But when you're about to buy something that will remain in your home for months or years, slowing down for a few seconds can save you from a much longer problem later. And perhaps the most useful question is this: would I still want this if nobody else could see it? If the answer is yes, that's interesting. Maybe it's genuinely useful. Maybe you love how it works. Maybe it makes your life easier. Maybe it brings you genuine enjoyment. But if the answer is no, then perhaps part of the desire came from comparison, from appearance, from wanting to feel like you got a bargain, from wanting something new. And those feelings are temporary. The object stays. That's why choosing quality can also mean choosing things that remain valuable after the excitement disappears. Something you still use when nobody is watching. Something you still appreciate when the packaging is gone. Something you would willingly buy again because experience has already proven its value. That is a much stronger definition of quality. And once you start thinking this way, you may notice something else. You don't actually need to buy less because you're forcing yourself to spend less. You buy less because fewer things genuinely make it through your filter. Your home becomes calmer almost as a side effect. Your closet becomes easier to navigate. Your drawers become easier to use. Your spending becomes easier to understand. And perhaps most importantly, you stop feeling like you're constantly trying to catch up with everything you've bought. Because the best possessions aren't the ones that demand your attention. They're the ones that quietly do their job and allow you to get on with your life. That may be the real reason quality can beat quantity. Not because one expensive object is automatically better than 5 inexpensive ones, but because the right object can remove the need for 4 more decisions. And when you multiply that across an entire home, an entire wardrobe, and years of spending, the difference becomes enormous.